cultural shock for you because I'm a biologist and we have our own view how nature and how life works. And I'm focusing here on reproductive behavior because reproductive success, because reproduction is the currency for a biologist. And we are in that status, we are interested in what is the environmental impact in humans, how they can reproduce, and what is their reproductive success. It has something to do with education, it has something to do with jobs and so on. So this is what we did mainly is to analyze large-scale data available in the internet. You can buy them, you have access to them. And you can see here, we analyzed the reproductive success from about 10 million people with the question, does the income, the resources, do have an impact on how people reproduce? Reproduce is just the number of offspring available, and we count it. And you see here, we did it in several countries, in Brazil, Mexico, Panama, in South Africa, USA, and Venezuela. And what you might not see so very good is the description of the graphs. Q1 to Q4 is the income, the house income, and Q1 is the lowest and Q4 is the highest income people have. And then we calculated with multivariate statistics how is that income related to the reproductive success of individuals. Here at that graph you see it on the only the performance of men, and the next one on women. And what you see here is the income related to never married or being childless. And just focus on the dot line on Q1 and Q4. For a man, it is very essential to have a higher income. The more money a man earns, the more children he has, the less childless he is. This is, you can compare it, doesn't matter whether you analyze in the USA the data or in Mexico, all these developing countries and so on. This is always the rule. Male do it better in humans, have more children, and are able to marry if they have more money available. This is obviously, we are talking about male or female choice. This is all obviously in humans female choice. The more money you have, the better you reproduce. And if we go ahead and to look at the women, and you compare these data, Q1 is the lowest income, Q4 is the highest income, then you don't find this kind of relationships. Women are not related to never married or childless, so it doesn't depend for women how much is their own income they reproduce on a stable level. This is a big sexual dimorphism in humans, and we calculate that for 10 million people. If you take another look, how is it affected, the association between social status and childlessness, education, and income? On this graph, we did it on a Sweden sample. Swedish people, approximately 7,000 males and 7,000 females. And you see on the dot, the full circles, solid circles, the performance of men, and the open symbols are the performance of women. And if we take a look at the upper graph, this is the income, low income, high income, low education, high education. Then you see it for the males, for men. There is a linear regression, a linear relationship. The more income, the more children they have. Not so for females. for women. They are a little bit on the opposite side. The more income they have, the less children they give birth. Completely different. If you would take a look at the education for women, education seems not to have any influence in their strategy of reproduction, but it has a big influence for males, again, for the men. The higher the education, the better they reproduce, because the higher the education, the more money they earn, they have more resources available. And this is obviously that what females' choice influences. If we exclude from these data childlessness, so that we have only reproducing people in the sample, then the effect in men diminishes. This is a very interesting thing, and more or less females or women do the same like before in the upper graph. And this childlessness is here on the last graph, very important. Here you see the only analyzed childlessness in relation to income and compared to females and males. And what you see is the less income, the more higher is the percentage and the proportion of being childless as a man. You don't have these effects in females. They are reproducing at a very, very continuous level. They are reproducing. And if we have more income, the percentage of being childless decreases. The same thing happens with education, but it is not that strong effect. So bad education and earning a lot of money is much more favorable for men than bad education, earning no money, or the opposite. And again, women are not affected from this. They are very, very continuous, stable, reproducing. Next graph seems something about, or gives something about, sorry. Here we go. This is this was from the Wisconsin longitudinal study we analyzed. So you see approximately 5,000 males and females. And we were very interested in what does it mean if someone has a job, and in this job he's a supervisory person, has supervisory abilities and non-supervisory positions. How does it work? Has this an influence to their reproductive success? And is there a sexual difference, sexual dimorphic performance in the offspring income? And if you take it to the take a look at how men are performing, then you see those with non-supervisory position reproduce lower than those with supervisory positions. The opposite effect is in women. Those who have a supervisory position do it not so good like having non-supervisory positions. And the ability to hire and fire people has also a tremendous impact in your reproductive performance. Men are vulnerable, if you like that. They are sensitive to such situations. If the average man, if he has the ability to hire and fire, then he reproduces better. And in women, there is no effect. So these are, for us, very, very serious, significant sexual dimorphic situations which have an impact to how the biology of individuals function. And each of these management courses and so, you always will hear men and women, okay, they a little bit, they behave different because this is obvious, but nobody is analyzing their physiology, and nobody is analyzing the impact of the environment and how they perform, for example, for such a basic thing like reproduction. Even more complicated thing is to analyze, this is always when people think that I'm completely crazy, the sex ratio at birth. Why sex ratio at birth? You, as a woman, you are able to influence the sex of your offspring. You can manipulate that. So if you have the wish to deliver a girl offspring, then, for example, one good rule is the frequency of copulation. During your cycle, you have to copulate very often. Then the probability decreases to receive or to deliver a female offspring. If you copulate during ovulation period, the probability increases significantly to deliver later a female offspring. And this is the same true for males. So such parameters you can influence the sex of your offspring. The other thing is a very tremendous influence is physiological stress. Physiological stress has its main impact in the female organism, that it reduces the number of male births and increases the number of female births. This is a physiological point because, and people don't like to hear that, but it is, so I'll tell you why this is. To be pregnant and the ontogeny of males are more energetically costly than those of females, because you have sexual dimorphism in the ontogeny. You have several critical periods where hormones are involved in the development of the male brain, the male urogenital tract, and you need no hormones for the development in female birth, and this is much more the thing. Testosterone is very costly, no hormones is very cheap for you. So you need for your to be able to give birth to male offspring, you need more energy. This is a fact in all mammalian individuals, animals, and we are just a mammalian. And here we made 3 studies. 2 studies we made on a large-scale analysis. We analyzed the university, the reproductive success of the employees of the University of Vienna. Then we looked at the educational influence of academics versus non-academics. Then we looked on the ownership of dwellings, yes or no ownership. This was related to the big financial disaster that all these housings and for 5 years ago, for all these crashing down, that people were not able to live and stay again in their houses, and we would like to have an overview how does it have an impact on their physiology. And we did that all for non-human primates in macaques as well, to have a comparative study. What is the theoretical background for that? The question is, which I tried to answer, can mammalian mothers influence the sex of their offspring? They can actually. Physiological stress, frequency of copulation, and so on seems to be 2 major factors. And we have in biology 2 main research streams. One is the maternal dominance hypothesis, and one is the Toulouse-Willard hypothesis. Valery granted the dominance hypothesis and said there is a relationship between dominant females and the increase of male birth. And this increase is related to testosterone. And the other hypothesis is, Toulouse-Willard, mothers in good conditions, in good body conditions, will gain evolutionary more advantage to produce sons, because they are in a better condition and they're high ranking afterwards, and then they have a better reproductive success. These are the two baselines here which guide us. If we take in academics, these are female academics in Vienna, and we analyze these sex ratios, then you see they do, both academics and non-academics do very well, because it is very sure, a very safe working place to be employed at the university. People don't lose their job if they have the ability to be there. Then it is more or less a fixed thing. So compared to the whole population in Vienna, they reproducing more sons than the whole population of Vienna. If you take a view of the age of these academics and non-academics, then you see a difference. Non-academics deliver sons and girls earlier than the academic population. This is possibly one of the key issue and the key problem we have in our society, that our system and each university system, to reach such a position, your studies and so on, your whole education, is not anymore favorable for your biological reproduction. It is too late. It is more or less too late. And I can show you some examples where it is really critical that we do not reverse all the thing. If we should reproduce before and then have the education stuff. And we should put the money in that and not in the other way around, to have child care and whatever it is, because this is not the optimum of reproduction for the children. In that case, we did not really find a difference between these academics and non-academics, but what we found a year cycle, and that showed us that the academics get more birth during springtime to boys than compared to the summer season. This kind of shift was not significant for the non-academics. It makes sense insofar that during the academic year, the season, spring season, if they give birth to spring season, the fertilization was in summer, and summer is the most relaxing period for the academics, and the non-academics are not so involved in this academic schedule. This is the statistics, this is the graphic to that. It makes sense. Studies show that male or men born during the springtime are increasing in height and have a better reproductive success than those born during autumn or winter seasons. But there is a trade-off. They are born in winter and autumn seasons. They die earlier compared to those, later compared to those in springtime. So from a biological reproduction side, it doesn't matter because they have already reproduced, and most of them, and it makes sense to that. If we go to the ownership of dwellings, because these explained you, we were driven from the economic disaster, happened several years ago. People lost their homes and so on. We had only the ability to analyze a sample, but it was quite a high sample from Uganda, which is very, I'm glad about that, because it is a more or less original society there, and we analyzed about 430,000 females, and here you see the big difference. Who is producing a son or an offspring or a female offspring? That women who own or live in a household who own a dwelling produce more sons than those who do not own a dwelling. If we go, this is the age structure of the women. The interesting thing, the fairly sad thing is, it ends with 45. So they had a reproduction period in Uganda during 45, 44, 54, 55 years, and afterwards they are more or less dead. You don't find any more in the sampling. People are dying very early, so we cannot analyze like in the other data before. We analyze people who are finishing their reproductive period in the menopausal period and so on. So these data are not available. They reproduce as long as they live and then they die.
And they're reproducing at 54?
Yeah.
Well, you got
yeah. Yeah, you have a big variety in our society as well.
They die, you say, right? And then they die.
And this is about the age distribution. You see, age distribution is more or less the same who owns the dwellings over the year. Reproductive success. So it is normal. This reproductive success, it has its plateau with starting with 40 to 55. So and they do not reproduce more or less. So the very interesting period is the period from possibly 20 to maximum to 30 years old. There is the highest, steepest increase in the reproductive output. And if we take a look at the different ages, so the first birth we could detect was 12 years, and the latest, the last one was 54 years. This is the span where they reproduce. And for all these birth ages clustered, we have a clustered 12, 16, and 1. It is always, if if a female lives in a household, then they reproduce, owns the dwelling, they have more, higher increase of son birth than they do not own the dwellings. So to own a dwelling seems to have a major, tremendous, significant impact in their reproductive physiology, and influences their reproductive outcome. This is the statistics here. The interesting thing here is in Uganda we have a more or less polygynous situation. A man owns, it is more or less owning more females, up to 3, 4 females, more they can't afford. And we corrected or controlled all these things, monogamous, polygynous, and so on situations. But what the obvious thing is that women tend to live in a monogamous situation, because in the polygynous or in polygamous situation, they have a strict hierarchy within the females, and the first wife has the biggest and the highest reproductive success, produces more sons than the last in the hierarchy. So this, we think about that most resources are for the high ranking available and not for the third or fourth woman in such a society. So this has an impact, a significant impact, but the highest impact on delivering sons is owning a dwelling. And if we correct the data or control the data for the education level, for being married, marriages and so on, not married and so on, this is no influence. The influence to produce higher sons, more sons, is owning a dwelling. So far to that, and then we go just take a few to non-human primates. This is a very small sample of primates, and I just want to give you an impression that what we analyzed here is the pre-conceptive testosterone level, as I indicated before, as Valerie Grant said, during the part of the fertilization, testosterone may be a very significant factor to produce sons. If you have a high testosterone, I deliver more sons later. And what we have shown for the Barbary macaques, is a macaque species, which is that one in North Africa. And here we were able to show that male offspring, female offspring, dominant, subdominant, that it is in this species, it is clear that dominant females have produced more sons compared to the subdominant, and this is related to testosterone. During at the time of fertilization. What does it mean, testosterone? Testosterone seems to be, and Barbara Sherline from Canada showed it very nice in humans, that dominant females, she categorized it, they have a leading position and were very successful in their job. They had a decreased, a lesser reproductive success in total numbers of birth, but they produced significant more males, boy offsprings, than subdominant females. And this, she were able to correlate it with testosterone. And testosterone is very essential for these individuals, for these females, to create their libido. Libido behavior is related to the testosterone secretion rate from the adrenal gland. This is not from the ovary comes to testosterone in females, it comes from the adrenal gland. And this is the major influence which influences their libido behavior. And then we have, we are back again, the more libido, the more copulation, the more higher is the possibility to produce a male offspring. And we could detect it for the Barbary macaques, right similar to that model Barbara Sherwin developed. This shows you all the logistic cumulative probability of producing sons. So the conclusion for that stuff, for the sex ratio stuff, is the environment has a tremendous influence in the physiology, in the reproductive physiology of humans. We have, it not only is influenced the birth rate per se, and possibly a take-home message, the more males earn, the higher is their reproductive success, the better their education is. We don't find it in women. We find a real stable reproductive success in females, in women. We don't find it in males. So if I have a bad job, if I have no money, my percentage is 15 to 20% that I will not have any offspring in my life. This is the impact of our education system, of our management system, and if we go more in detail, in depth, then there is a big thing, a big influence of the sex ratio, which is mainly influenced by resources. Availability of resources seems to have an impact in producing, in humans, producing the more costly sex and offspring males. This is to talk about, possibly one should reflect that our environment is very invasive to us. Thank you.